Hey guys and gals, welcome to vlog number 2. A lot has happened in the last week. I recorded a bunch, was going to do some other vlogs, but just been so busy and I wanted to keep you caught up on everything. So this is more real-time, valuable information as we go. But I wanted to preface this video with a couple things real quick as I wrap up the editing on it and get ready to dump it. It's a little breezy in the background, so bear with me with the wind. Cold front moving in, so I'm trying to get ready to go hunting, which is good. I hope everyone else out there is doing the same, if possible. But a couple things that I wanted to address real quick. First and foremost, I changed up the format just a little bit in this vlog. I actually sat down in front of the camera for a few minutes just because I was waiting for someone to show up at my house and meet with them. Wasn't sure of their timeline, and I wanted to fix some audio issues from the last video. Additionally, I realized going into this and doing these vlogs that there's a real good chance that it's going to be detrimental to my season, to my success, because unfortunately there are a couple bad apples in our group of hunters that like to sabotage the things that I do out of jealousy or ignorance or... Ooh. See the deer in the background? But whatever it may be, I know that as I go in depth and explain some of these situations to you, which is the whole purpose of this, it's not to show off what I'm doing by any means, and that's why I chose to do a little bit longer format, a little bit different style than just the typical YouTube content. But I want to tell these things to you like a story, but also be in-depth and detailed and informative so that hopefully you can apply that to your situation. I'm really just trying to kind of explain to you how I operate and how I approach every situation. But again, I realize that by sharing more details, there are people out there that are going to try and take advantage of that. And if you're one of those people and you're watching this right now, I just want you to know that karma is a real thing, and you will get what's coming to you. So keep that in mind. And lastly, before we get into the video, I just wanted to make a note that I didn't intend for this video to be as emotional as it turned out to be. And maybe you'll watch it and you won't find it emotional. Maybe it's just emotional to me because obviously the content is much more near and dear. But I just wanted to make a note. This video, this vlog really involves two things that I'm extremely passionate about, and really it involves the things that are going to affect our future the most. And by that I mean the next generation in hunting and getting kids out there and showing them how to care for the land and how to appreciate the wildlife, and not just teach them that it's all about going out and killing. So I hope you enjoy the video. Please, again, if you enjoy this stuff, you gotta let me know. You gotta like and share the content so I can help this grow and spread my message. And also I wanted to note that this channel is not going to be dedicated to hunting, not by any means at all. It just happens to be the time of the year that we're getting into it, and that is how I feed my family. 100% of our food is either harvested from the woods or raised on our property. Well, 100% of our protein, I should say. We do buy fruits and vegetables, obviously. But again, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching. What I would do is challenge anyone listening to this. Just try to be more connected with your environment. Try to be more connected with your food. I had my target buck, my number one target buck, the deer that I'm after this year, inside of 15 yards on my first day of hunting, and I didn't get it done. Now, the game's changed a little bit for me. I do things a little bit differently right now than I used to, and there's a learning curve. I'm finding that out. For the past couple of years, basically since having kids or reaching a point in my life where having kids was a priority and kind of shifted my perspective. Basically since that point, I've been trying to add box blinds and, wildlife ADD. I've been trying to add box blinds to the property, our home farm property where I grew up, and focus more on improving habitat, manipulating habitat, and using things that I know just to create, I don't want to call them easier, but more predictable situations for hunting to increase my chances that way. Years ago, my mindset was, minor modifications if possible, but really just reading sign, most recent information, cross-referenced with historical information, and then making calculated moves. And I've killed a lot of my target bucks on the very first sit of the season, or my first sit in that area after that target buck. Again, I'm hunting a relatively large area or spread out chunks, so I have options. And once I reached a point where I consciously stayed out of areas where I knew that the odds of me killing my target buck would be significantly better if I waited until this time of the year or that time of the year or the specific set of conditions that I needed, my chances or my odds, my success rate increased exponentially. But now I'm back to trying to create situations to get deer to do what I want them to do, but I don't have control over all the variables. And this past weekend was a perfect example of that. I promised my son Remy, he's 5 years old, he sees what I do, he sees the results. I take him along for the ride as much as I possibly can. But there's a pretty big difference between casual hunting and getting truly serious and being successful. And the casual side, nothing against it, but it relies a lot more on luck than preparation. And he's starting to get more and more of a taste of that all the time. And with me trying to improve the property for better situations, not just for me to take my kids hunting or my kids to eventually hunt there alone, but also my extended family that shows up and hunt the property. My goal is to make things really awesome for them in some areas so they can show up and hunt certain areas on a variety of different winds and not have to be so specific, because I completely understand that not everyone's life revolves around the same things that mine do, and most people don't put the amount of time or mental investment into what I do, essentially. So my goal is to create these situations, and this year I was able to take Remy along for the ride with a couple of these things that I'm doing. Specifically this situation that brings us to the point of a couple critical failures that I made. Just last week we were actually going to go hunting, and things didn't work out during the day. I just couldn't get caught up with the amount of work that I needed to do, both in preparation for fall, later fall, winter time frame around our house and our little self-sustaining ecosystem that we are in, but also client work and other things, and just getting caught up from being gone for a period of time hunting in Wyoming. So I couldn't get caught up. we couldn't get out in time. I didn't get all my gear situated. I hadn't done laundry. I hadn't went through my very rigid scent control regiment, just to keep the pressure off. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared. And there's a spot that I really wanted to make huntable for us. It's relatively easy to access, and when the pressure is down, it's a phenomenal spot, and I know that the deer really like to use it. So last Friday, made the call. Instead of going hunting and trying to pack in a hunt and scramble all day, we took a drive and picked up a box blind and went and installed it. Now, this is the second box blind I've installed on the farm, and both of them I've done during season because I'm busy on all these client properties throughout the summer trying to set up their properties, and mine kind of always takes the back seat. So it is what it is. But last year I put a box blind up on a tower, and the deer actually reacted to it fairly well. They were not really thrown off, and the buck that I'm after this year was daylighting on that very small food plot with that recent addition to it. So that was promising. But this year rolled around, wanted to add another box blind to give us another option for hunting. And I didn't have the manpower, didn't have the time, so we set it on the ground. It was a pre-built stick frame box blind constructed by some Amish in the area. The price of a blind like this is about half of what the higher end box blinds are, the Orions, the Earth blinds, which are fantastic blinds. But I wanted to test it out. Is it going to be sealed as tight? Is it going to be as solid? Is it going to be quiet when you're inside? Can you get away with movement? How do the windows operate? How does it feel? Is it comfortable? And can I put a kid in there for multiple hours on end? You done? Okay, I think we're done now. But basically, I wanted to test out a different type of blind. I put this blind in this location for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, highly attractive food source. Deer love to spend time there, but you can't really hunt it. It's in a bottom, and I would not advise hunting an area like this on a client property, where they have better options. But the reality is, on the farm, the wildlife habitat and deer hunting takes a far, far back seat, like way the back of the bus, compared to the agricultural production side of things. So I can't put food plots on ridge tops. That takes away from the more productive tillable land. So I'm forced to put them down in the bottoms. And those are just hard areas to hunt. The wind's unpredictable, the air movement's unpredictable. They're hard to access, hard to exit. The deer are bedded up on the hillsides with essentially stadium seating looking down in the valley when you try and access. So this specific location had everything it needed to produce, short, easy access, all these things, but still needs some work, still needs a significant amount of improvements. Put the blind in one spot, trying to kind of test it out to see if I can get away with the air movement down there when I'm concealed in a blind and that air is not moving around me over my body all the time. And then also I'm not disturbing the depths of this valley. But I also wanted to see the position of the blind. Does it make sense as a good observation type stand, so I can jump in there on a rainy day and wait things out, but also see a lot of what's going on, or slip in there when I don't have a better option and be able to make moves in the near future after collecting more intel from that observation location. So I didn't want to anchor it down permanently yet. I wasn't sold on the location, and again, I didn't have the time or the manpower to raise it up just a little bit that night. So we opted to put it on the ground, knowing that improvements needed to be made. There's a couple trails that actually cut behind the blind in this thick little pocket of trees, and the plan is to kind of feather some edges in there to create some barriers and force the deer to go around in front of the blind just for this 15-yard stretch, and then also create better cover in there for access and exit strategy. But again, this was a dump and hunt sort of situation almost. So anyway, fast forward to last Saturday, October the 8th. I mean, this kid did a fantastic job for a 5-year-old. He logged 7 hours in that blind before we saw a single deer. And you know, we did 5 hours in the morning, pulled for lunch to regroup, and went and talked to one of the Amish neighbors to see what he's seeing and give him what we know as far as intel goes. And then we grabbed lunch and got back in the blind, this new blind that we just put out. And another couple hours went by and we finally started seeing our first deer. So he did fantastic and he kept a positive attitude the whole time. So I really commend him for that. Was he calm and quiet and did he sit still? No, absolutely not. But that's a kid, right? And that's why I paid the money for the blind. And anyway, we sat there, we saw a couple groups of does coming into this food plot, and all of a sudden I look down to the trail. So in this setup, we are able to come in through a clump of cover and access the back door of this blind, and then from the blind, you can look basically straight down into this creek bottom. One step up from the creek bottom, we've got a series of food plots that kind of move deer, pinch them down in the spot. And then there's a trail, the access road to get to those food plots kind of wraps around to our right. And that's also planted in the same food plot stuff. So the idea there is to move those deer up this trail into that plot. There's a couple other leading lines coming into that plot, and you know, just move them past you and see if we can hunt them in that spot. And the does, all of the does came from in front of us as anticipated. They're bedded much closer to the food. And they poured in the plot, and the first ones were a couple skittish of the blind for sure. The next ones that came in were very, very comfortable. Eventually, I look over to my right and I see a buck coming up this trail. A really nice 3-year-old that we've got eyes on with the camera. It's gonna be a stud of a deer if he survives a couple more years. And he, instead of feeding into the plot, as I hoped he would do, he veered off behind us. And I could watch him through the brush a little bit with the binos, and he worked a scrape, and then eventually he worked his way to the north of us, and there's a bigger, like a 5-acre alfalfa field there. And I just assumed that he was gonna work his way out to that alfalfa field right before dark. It's down in the valley, so it doesn't get a lot of pressure yet. And it's an obvious destination food source for these deer. A little while later, watching these does, I mean, we were having a great time. Everything with the blind seemed to work. The way the air was moving, those does definitely should have busted us, but we were concealed enough that we had deer, we had does within 10, 15 feet of the blind, and Remy's in the blind wiggling around. The windows are tinted on the blind so these deer can't see in. Now I don't know, with that many deer in the plot, it would have been tricky to open up a window and get a shot, but it was cool. We had a great time, a fun experience. And I was keeping an eye on what was going on behind us and down in that spot because I've never hunted this spot and I wanted to see how deer move there. And eventually I look down and I catch movement, and around the corner on this trail is our target buck, the number one buck, the buck that we were hunting for in that spot. And basically as soon as I get eyes on him, pull up the binos, confirm it's him, I set the binos down, tried to grab the camera, brought the camera up, and he was gone. I assumed that he kind of looked like he was going that direction, so I assumed he kind of followed the same path that 3-year-old buck took just a few minutes beforehand, heading up through that brushy area and out into that alfalfa field. And at this point in time, I'm under the impression that it is getting dark outside. Last light, we're seeing these more mature animals moving in, and we're kind of getting down to that time of night. So this buck disappears in the brush. I kind of get in that Western trying to get it done mode, and I'm like, what can I do to get this deer in range? So I crack the back window while these does are right in front of us, knowing that it's gonna have an effect, but I stick the grunt call out the back window and I just give a couple quick grunts. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait, and one of the does got real nervous in front of us, again, fully anticipated and was fully willing to risk that. She got real nervous, eventually worked her way off, and we waited and waited and waited, and about 20 to 30 minutes had went by, and nothing, I didn't see any movement from behind us, didn't see that buck go out to that field. We can't really see that field real well, and there's a little bit of a swale there behind us. So just assumed that he went out to that field and it wasn't going to happen. So I told Remy, as soon as these does work their way out of this small plot, we're going to get out of the blind and inch our way back to the truck. We had to climb this hill and get up to the truck anyways. From the truck, we can see that alfalfa field. So this isn't the most ideal setup, but again, I'm working with a 5-year-old, carrying all my equipment, including the chairs and tripod and everything, to the blind on the first sit. So I was just like, hey, I'm just gonna try it. And I basically drove the truck to within 75 yards of the blind. But we had to go to the truck anyways, and in my mind, I would prefer to be sneaky. The wind would have been in our favor, and get up and maybe get eyes on that buck at last light and see where he ended up or what he was doing in that field, especially since we have to go that way anyways, rather than risking going up there after dark and crossing paths eye to eye with him and spooking him and not even knowing it. That's, in my mind, that's even worse when you bump a deer without knowing it. So that was the plan, and it failed miserably. The does cleared the plot, we stepped out of the blind, and I had a bow in one hand, the camera in my other hand, and trying to, maneuver a 5-year-old and engage stealth mode. And he did really well. And I handed him the GoPro and just said, here, point this at whatever you want. And got out of the blind, and I set everything down, turned around, slowly closed the blind door, super, super quiet. And as I'm doing that, I hear something walking. Now, it's in the thick brush. It was kind of that cadence that may have been a squirrel taking a few hops and hitting a tree, may have been a rabbit taking a few hops and hitting cover, or it may have been a deer turning around provoked by its curiosity. I don't know. But it didn't take long. I picked up my bow and essentially turned, and that buck ran away, and he was standing less than 15 yards away from us in this thick little chunk of brush and cover. And I never saw him until he jumped out of that brush. That was a little deflating. And the biggest regret is that I feel like I let my kid down a little bit. We had ourselves in a good position, and in hindsight, had we waited in the blind, things probably would have played out differently, but maybe not. My experience with mature bucks, I'm guessing that what happened is that buck reacted immediately to that grunt. I thought maybe he didn't hear me because he was upwind, the wind was pushing back at us, and I grunted very softly. So I just assumed he didn't hear me, and he kept on working his way out towards that field. But chances are he heard us, and he reacted the way that we wanted him to, but he came in and maintained the thickest cover he could while approaching the situation with caution and just kind of surveying the field, right? And he was just standing there waiting to figure out what was going on. Or he was working his way in slowly, and when we stepped out of the blind and made our own little crunching noises, that provoked the curiosity, and he came towards us as well. So I just feel bad, like the kid put in so much time in the blind that day, and to harvest the deer that we're after on the first day of the season with my 5-year-old son watching everything go down would have been the absolute peak of my hunting career, without a doubt. Mistakes happen, right? Failure is inevitable, and this is certainly not the first time I've screwed up on killing a big mature deer. As long as you learn from your mistakes and don't let them happen again, then they bring a significant amount of value to what you're trying to accomplish, whatever your goal may be. So let's look at the situation. What were the mistakes? What was the one defining fatal mistake that screwed up this opportunity? It wasn't getting out of the blind. Did that play a factor? Yes, absolutely. It wasn't, but I don't think that, that was not the issue. You got to dial back even further yet. And it wasn't throwing a grunt at that deer and getting his attention. Again, that definitely was a variable that that came into play with how he moved through that area, but that wasn't the wrong thing to do. That was just trying to make something happen, right? There's two things that I learned here, two major things. And this is, this all comes with being new to this type of situation. First and foremost, the tinted windows on the blind messed with my perception of time. Even with looking at my watch, even with, occasionally looking at my phone, even though I had zero cell phone service down there, which is also a fantastic thing when you really can just lock yourself in a box with your kid and enjoy the time. But I just lost perception of what time it was, and also, I'm outside all the time, but our schedule usually right at dusk, we're in the house, we're feeding kids, we're taking care of school stuff, getting ready for the next day, and focusing on getting kids to bed. I'm not outside as it's getting darker unless I'm hunting. So this was my first time hunting in Wisconsin this year during this time of the day, and I just lost perception of the timeline. The tinted windows threw me for a huge loop. They cut a significant amount of light from getting in that blind, what you see. So in my mind, making those more aggressive moves, I was like, damn, we are right at last light here. We've got about 15 minutes to try and get this done, or it's not going to happen. And as soon as I stepped out of that blind onto the ground and looked out, it was like, wow, someone turned the lights back on, and we've got a lot more time left. And it was a little awkward feeling. But we could have stepped back in the blind at that point too. I don't know. At that point we were already kind of in that Western mode, trying to make some moves. But that wasn't even the mistake that I made. The fatal mistake that I made in this situation was not elevating that blind. If I would have taken the time that night and I had everything with me, it would have taken me probably 2 more hours by myself. I do have a helper, but it would have taken me probably at least 2 more hours by myself to elevate that blind about 4 feet, 3 feet off the ground. That was my plan. And it would have involved a lot of digging, a lot of messing around with the 2 people, having to get in and out of the tractor, all that stuff. So it was already getting late. It was already like 6:30 p.m. when we set that blind. So I opted to just leave it. Had I taken the time and raised that blind and just had the confidence of that location to be done with that spot, that would have set us up above the elevation of that deer, and we would have seen everything that was happening. But because we were at eye level with that deer, he came in that cover, and there are no better large animals out there at hiding and using cover than mature whitetail bucks. And that's exactly what he did. So you just have to learn from those mistakes. And at this point, I don't think I'm going to go elevate that blind at this point in the season, because it's just a lot of commotion back in that area. And the reality, and another unfortunate factor involved here, is that as this month rolls on, the pressure is only going to increase and exponentially in that specific location, because it is very close to our hunting cabin, which is built in the middle of the best deer hunting valley on the property. So it puts a lot of pressure on the property itself. So that puts me on a shorter timeline, and now I'm just at the point where I need to try and hunker down here and see if I can make a game plan to get after this deer. But again, I have not put a lot of time into my own season, so I don't have a ton of intel. So I'll bring you more on that in the future. So definitely like and subscribe, and I'm going to try and bring you along on this journey as I pursue this deer. Now, the good news is I don't think that this mistake or this encounter that ended in failure is detrimental to my season. I've certainly made mistakes on mature bucks before. I've screwed up opportunities. It just makes you have to work a lot harder and dig a lot deeper to get the information that you need to get it done. Again, the most disappointing part is that I screwed up for my kid. I think it was a relatively soft bump on this deer. I kind of like to look at bumps as like a 3-strike type of basis. Sight, sound, and smell are those 3 things that are gonna invoke that flight response in a deer. All 3 of them, gone. I mean, that deer, especially a mature buck in a high pressured area, you hit him with all 3 of those strikes, he's probably not coming back for a while. 2 of the 3 is a much softer bump. You know, 1 of the 3 softer yet. The whole bump and dump concept of like walking up on a deer, startling him out of a bedding area. They only get 1 or maybe 2 of those strikes. But the deer that comes in while you're hunting, picks you out in the tree, catches a whiff of you, that's a 3-strike, you're out sort of situation. So those are the hard bumps. In this situation, I think, you know, he came in looking for what was on the other end of that grunt and stayed in cover, and maybe he heard us when we stepped out of the blind and then eventually came and saw us, or maybe he heard us kind of whispering amongst each other. I don't know, but I don't think it was a hard bump because he essentially took 2 hops down into deeper cover in that creek bottom, and then he stopped and started blowing at us as if he didn't know what we were and he was trying to get us out of the area or warn the other deer. But from my experience, and I've made lots of mistakes on mature deer. From my experience, a mature buck, when he knows he's being hunted and he's in that threatened situation, he's gone. He is out of there like a ninja in the night. He does not stick around to blow at you. They don't do it. So most situations, if all of a sudden deer blows behind you and you hear something run off, probably wasn't a big buck, or I shouldn't say big buck, but a mature buck. The really mature bucks a lot of times don't blow. They're just gone. So, the other positive thing, if you want to look at it that way, is there's been a lot of commotion in that valley as of late. The farm has been pumping manure, so there was an outfit there that ran a big hose through the valley to the back ridge. They're up and down that road on ATVs and trucks quite frequently in the last week, monitoring that hose and pumping that manure through there. So it wasn't like that valley has been completely calm and untouched until this point. And early in the season, not a ton of hunting pressure, plenty of cover. It didn't take much for that deer to get into cover and feel safe again. You didn't have to run a long ways to seek that cover. So again, I don't think it's going to be detrimental. It just means I have to work a lot harder. The other positive thing that I honestly take away from this is I think it's going to be very beneficial for my son to learn that even after you do all these things and prepare and get yourself in position with a buck like this or an animal that you want to harvest, you still have to execute. And we did not execute. It came down to that crunch time and mistakes were made and it just didn't happen. So he's going to learn that, there's a lot more that goes into it. And honestly, up until this point, the previous 5 years of his life, I think he's very much been under the impression that dad leaves and goes and picks out what animal he wants to bring home, because I have been very calculated and I spend a lot less time away from home these days making decisions and hunting the right time. So he's learning from that. The bad news is, again, the pressure's only going to get worse. So I'm going to have to constantly adapt to these situations and change off of just the ideal situation of hunting a food plot. So if you like this kind of stuff and you want to learn how I adapt and overcome these situations and follow along my season, you got to subscribe to the channel so I know that's worth my time. But thanks for watching. I've got a guy here, give me a quote on propane tank. Take care.